fall. We're coming to you live from Hall of Flower, Santa Rosa, in the Talent and Cannabis Talent House. My name's Sloane Barbour, founder and CEO of Engin Sciences and a partner at FlowerHire. And I'm here with my good friend, colleague, and great creative mind, Jamie Leo.
Hey, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's great to be here.
Jamie, you came into my life about a year ago. It was a glorious day. And we sort of started to get to know each other and started to create together, and it's been an incredible experience. Why don't you share a little bit about your background and background in creative in particular, and how you arrived here in the cannabis industry?
Well, my first real career was painting rocks when I was in 8th grade, and through a beloved Edmund Science catalog, I got the first blacklight to come to my tiny Iowa town and started painting little psychedelic rocks, which I then sold at the University of Iowa and then ended up seeing them on like professors' desks 20 years later, so that was great. And, but I'm a creative generalist, and I've always kept two sort of career themes, or at least professional disciplines, float for me, which is writing and the design and the creation of visual. And I had done lots of scenic design and lots of set work and a lot of some interiors and so forth. But whenever I wrote, I usually wrote about design. So it was like, it just kind of flowed. But I had the terrible pneumonia that killed Jim Henson, and it had kind of fled through the production houses of New York. It was sort of a Legionnaire's disease sort of pneumonia. And
when was this?
1833.
Yeah.
And
you were still a teenager at the time.
Yes, I was. But it was a time for me of having to figure out that I wasn't going to be able to be in those densely toxic scenic shops anymore. My lungs got banged up. So I bought my little toaster, a little 2CI. This will give you a clue of what year this is. A little 2CI of a computer. And I, as a really crappy patient, I taught myself Photoshop and Illustrator, and flew out of that into the scariest gig imaginable, which was doing covers to Spy magazine. And so every time I would do a pixel on Hillary or O.J. Simpson's face, famous covers, a couple of them won awards, anyway. But every time you touch it, like if you made one wrong move, because you had a 500 megabyte computer for these high-res things. Anyway, so every day I was like going, well, whatever.
Most of your time is spent waiting for the computer to catch up to the creativity.
That is correct. And so, but I loved doing that. And then I found myself in a really nice age dynamic, because I had done some typesetting for some clients and some printing, so I
in the 1800s.
I knew my way around a Heidelberg press, and I understood color correction pretty well. With the understanding that many people say you can't learn color correction in under 10 years, which is something I tell every junior art director I work with, that like, don't get excited because you don't know anything even along the way, because it's so much to learn. But anyway, I ended up getting a very unusual sequence. I got an artist residency that took me to Turkey, where we invented a national holiday in Turkey, which was quite a wild experience, and I'll have to get that to you later in another interview. But then I got hired, thanks to a dear, brilliant colleague, Paul Clay, to be one of the key designers of Rent on Broadway. And that was an amazing experience, and I went right from that to a headhunter, who then made me the creative director to the online agency of record for IBM, which I did for 5 years. And in that, there is a through line to my work. I've always been pretty fiercely committed to doing my own creative efforts. So that may take me to South Beach to be part of Art Basel, and that's been exciting. I've also written pieces that have been on stage, and I've directed pieces that have been in various places for the Smithsonian. The point of that is that as a creative generalist, I very much like, the core of my work is storytelling. Maybe my telling the story didn't convince you of that, but the idea of it is that working with the visual landscape of design, we get to tell a story. And so you and I have had a great time of the wordsmanship. And I think that that's an exciting part of how we articulate this new engine of the cannabis industry.
Yeah, that's right. And so First of all, congratulations on an exciting career. I can't wait to be regaled in more of the stories of Turkish holidays, hopefully this evening. But we're now entering a new paradigm, and you sort of, as you described, you've come and worked with physical mediums, right? Experiences, stories, plays, and design is sort of an overarching element of all of that.
That's correct.
And we're, I think, entering into, and both you and I are New Yorkers, for the record. And so we see cannabis here, especially in California, which is the most modern market, sort of maybe outside the lens of the traditional cannabis culture, which a lot of people say, and is likely true, really was born out of California. But New York has its own sort of view on not just the plant, but on how to build a brand, right, around what is ultimately a consumer product, right, or a retail experience. So how'd you end up in the cannabis industry from all this sort of traditional design, and what gets you excited about this space in particular?
Well, I had a close colleague of mine that I'd worked with on a couple of projects. She's in the PR space. She had paid attention to, I had done some work with boutiques. I've done some work. I've had my own practice over the years on occasion. But I was a creative director to the Grace Foundation's sustainable food programs. And I've always, it's just a piece of who I am, that I've always wanted to fight the good fight. And I've been very fortunate as an advertiser. I haven't sold toxic things to children. Like a lot of advertisers, that's what you end up doing. Or, it's like some compromises.
Well, Coca-Cola, one of the best brands in the world, is sugar
example
water.
A, right?
Right.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
It can be done.
Yeah.
But perhaps
that's correct. But the question of how one walks their own ethical path and so forth.
Right.
So working with the Grace Foundation, I was working with CSAs, I was working with organic farmers, we were working with programs about nutrition and diabetes and heart disease, and it was a very exciting world to be fighting good fights. And my colleague Kim had seen my work there, and she was working with somebody on a cannabis thing, and she brought me in and said, I think, Jamie, that because you've got a breadth and your marketing chops are out there. So why don't you come and take a look? And I started working with Alex Shaw, who we both know. And Alex, as a brilliant serial entrepreneur and a remarkable mind, and he brought forward an idea for something that would ultimately be called Solo Sciences. And Solo Sciences had the amazing experience of landing right as the vape crisis started to hit. And one of the things that Solo Sciences was trying to do was make sure that people were having a harder time going online on Amazon and buying knockoffs of Kingpen and just like the things that were hurting people.
Which was actually where the toxicity from vitamin E acetate came in. It wasn't found in the legal regulated industry. It was selling perfectly safe products.
Exactly.
So it was almost an anti-counterfeiting
That was
platform.
very central. Yes, thank you. You said that better than I did. But it was a very, and it was startup at its most exciting and most energetic. And
that was your first sort of tech startup as well?
No, I've been involved in 2 medical startups that have been very exciting experiences as well. We're a company that's doing Nuance Medical is their name, and they've been doing work where they're trying to find greener, not just greener, but practical solutions to long-time, largely aerosol products in that space. But some really great work there, which again is a different discussion. But
same thing, sort of progressive viewing things in a way, like how do you use this as a force to help humanity?
And I think coming from the arts, one of the things that I've always brought to the table, and I hope that I've shown that even in what we've done here at the House of Talent, is I really believe in a sort of arts povera. I believe that
Arts povera.
It's it was an Italian movement of artists trying to find household objects that then would be transformed, not just presenting the Campbell soup can, but taking the Campbell soup can and making it something. And so finding solutions for delivering. I mean, when we did Rent, the remaking of the Nederlander Theater in New York, it was about finding solutions, not just spending money.
Well.
And
and when you're in a startup, especially in this space, that's a really important skill set to have. And you've shown that here, in this home, and we're going to go and show the viewers, some of a little bit of a tour around this place here. But it's a Frank Lloyd Wright designed home in Santa Rosa, California, and we arrived here, you know, to do a series of activations and connect with our community and support our brands and the brands of our partners. But we didn't have much, you know, a couple of pictures from Airbnb, no measurements.
Yeah,
so
not a single measurement.
which is probably for someone who's produced things like Rent. You want to measure twice, cut once.
Yeah,
how do you approach a space when you first walk into it? How do you, as a director, sort of art director, see that all kind of come together?
The simple answer is not a very interesting one. I text mapped everything. I literally tried to map everything based on 36-inch door widths. And so I was able to at least build some estimations. I mean, it's a pretty boring answer, but it was.
But the aesthetic that was developed, you know, really has come together, and you know, we're hosting some really awesome events here, and we appreciate you helping us put it together. And it sort of brings up the
and a great team of people.
We've been living in a digital world for the last 18 months because of, you know, the pandemic and everything that's brought, and we're sort of in many ways as a community within the cannabis industry coming together for the first time for a lot of people. And so brands are coming out into the 3 dimensions again, right?
Absolutely.
How do you think about a brand and, you know, how it manifests in both the digital and physical way, and what is the sort of brands that you're seeing in California and beyond that are, you know, doing it well, and what's getting you excited about people kind of coming back out in the world and how they're going to interact with brands?
You know, I guess for me, and you've heard me say this in a couple of ways, but to me it feels really important that we, and I think this is very true of California, because California has a cultural reference around cannabis that's been sort of percolating for a decade. And I think it's really easy for the California, and I may be fully wrong, but it is an assumption that I see reinforced, that the SoCal landscape to some degree is not confronted with the legacy. That's not accurate. That's not well said. But the point is that how we address the injustices going to make a national brand. So we've got terrible racial component of great suffering that is part of this. But on the other side of that awfulness is the fact that there are still incredibly damning misconceptions about the cannabis space, about cannabis users, about a wide range of things that really are kind of unparalleled in the development of a product expression. We don't, you know, think of a product that the first association a large swath of the audience may have is pejorative.
Yeah.
Like, there's not many of those products that we've, and so to me,
certainly not many of those products that are responsible for $20 billion in annual revenue growing to $100 billion.
Precisely. Right? And there's plenty of things that hurt people that don't have that luggage. You know, you know, plenty of them. And so for me, what I'm very interested in, and I'm lucky to be working with you and your love of data and the folks at Engin and, you know, Valerie and Pale and team, the importance of being able to look at solid data. And this is you know, if you've talked to any creatives, this is the mantra right now, but it's real, because in cannabis, we've lost 60 years. Right. We're 60 years behind, and everyone is doing their best to catch up, but the fact that we're not federal yet gets in the way of even making the kind of cross-pollinating research that needs to be happening to get us to the point where where we have some understanding that some terpene has an effect on a large portion of people who are suffering from various mental illnesses or physical, other forms of physical illness. And so to me, being part of that is very exciting, and I try to pay attention to it. But to go back to the negative message that we must overcome, I am very, very conscious that we are getting ready to be in a national discussion about this that has not even begun. Yep. And because as we get closer and closer to a federal landscape, we are going to see the pushback culturally that we're going to have to rise above, and we're going to have to find ways to communicate what brand is. And one of the great things about FlowerHire is that it is really the perfect person-to-person vehicle, because you are bringing people in who may have no cannabis experience, but the messages that you and Mike and just everybody in the FlowerHire team put forward helps to groom a narrative. And then that narrative is something that every time I talk to the terrific people in your team, and when we're working with the kind of recruiter messages, the messages that are coming forward are complex, they're multi-audience. You know, the difference between the difference between what a bud tender needs to know about their role in the industry as opposed to the lab researcher, and just the breadth of it is very exciting to me.
And I think
I kind of wandered around that answer a little bit.
No, it's great, and I think that what, you know, in the context of what FlowerHire and Engin, which is sort of our new venture together that we launched a little less than a year ago with our partner and a founder and CTO, Valerie, that whole world of tech entering into the cannabis industry and utilizing the cannabis industry in a way as a launch pad and a grand experiment, because that's how you're describing it, right? So disruption is automatic in the space. It's constantly disrupting itself, and of course, as you said, it's disrupting 60 years of pejorative messaging, and there's, you know, federal legislation, so there's a lot of macro elements as well. And, you know, we built a brand together, careersincannabis.com, and, you know, we'll show your work here, one of our stickers. And, you know, when we were developing this, you know, as part of the Engin ecosystem, you know, there's something simple about it, and also something that speaks to in just one sort of sentence in one brand, even though it's not maybe the sexiest, coolest, you know, word.
Nor is it intended to.
Nor is it intended to be. It's like, these are jobs in an industry that's going to employ 1 million Americans. It's really simple, and I think in many ways, because the context of a job and a career is so apolitical, right? It's not. I mean, no one argues against jobs. No one thinks jobs are bad.
Right, got it, exactly.
Right.
Yes, it is a gateway drug.
So it's a gateway into saying, okay, well, this is a good job that, you know, pays well, and this industry is making intentional steps to build diverse and equitable, fair practices, what some would call conscious capitalism, and there's interesting elements to that from a brand perspective that might be able to break through to a consumer base or an audience that's different than a consumer of the product, right? So how do you think about these ancillary brands, and specifically the job category within the space, and how it can be leveraged to create change?
Love it. You know, Mike Siebold, one of our colleagues, in his brilliant observations, said something that's really been very much on my mind the other day, in the fact that one of the things that this brand faces, or that the cannabis as brand faces, is that the personality of a brand is right now absolutely driven by regional dynamics. So, you know, the example that comes to mind for me immediately is the Willie Nelson's brand, and the fact that 3 years ago, I think plenty of us saw that as probably the breakthrough brand, or at least a breakthrough brand that was going to go the distance.
Willie's Reserve is the
Willie's Reserve, exactly. And so, but the fact that, you know, it would be interesting to do a serious analysis of where that brand didn't rise to the next level. Now, it could very well be that it still will, so I'm not trying to be disrespectful to that brand. But when we look at, like, the kind of work that's being done by Opal, for example, that is bunkering down on a kind of mythology that is very, very close to the SoCal landscape, but is in many ways more in keeping with the kind of folksiness that we think of when we think of, like, early Banana Republic, where they did a kind of a folksy vocabulary that became their foundation. And I think that stands a good chance to have a national, because they're taking a kind of a popular American mythology as an underpinning. But I also spent enough time with East Coast, well, certainly the New England brands, that have a very different point of view, and, you know, are closer to, you know, and I don't just mean the sort of the fact that it's more matter of fact in that sort of puritanical way, as it were, from New England, but there is the messaging always gets a little bit closer, in my observation, to making messages about benefits.
Yeah.
The benefit of this, and I think that where we're going to be in a year is, I hope that all the brands just continue to articulate their story, their human story and their brand story. I would hope that brands will continue to bring forward their data, because we're all we're like the 19th century right now, where every one of us, and I'm a very infrequent user, as you know, but one of the things that I've really committed to, even back during Solo, was I report. So if somebody tells me that this particular strain is going to make me giggle all night, and all I want to do is walk on the beach,
yep,
I report that. It's like, maybe it's my BMI. Who the hell knows what it is that what I had for dinner? All those dynamics.
A lot of factors.
Exactly right. And so, but my point is that it would be really exciting if that kind of informational narrative continues, because I think that is a very subversive way to fight the negative associations. And so, while we want to be playful, we want to look like a new industry. We've got to look like we are a new industry, and we want to do things right. We've got, like, I told you I did sustainability. Like, our green footprint ain't green right now. We've got a lot of battles to, and at the same time, we've been talking to people the last 2 days who are on the front lines of addressing that. And so that's, in a new industry, yes, there are going to be people that are just after the cash, but there's also so many people in this industry who are so inspiring to be around and have amazing stories to tell about the struggle to make something that may actually make a huge difference to our culture, to our society, and to the well-being of people all over the world.
Absolutely. Net positive for humanity, for sure. You are a net positive to humanity. Jamie Leo, creative director at Engin Sciences, creative director at FlowerHire, legendary colleague and friend. I really appreciate you, Jamie. And thanks for joining us on the FlowerHire Sunset Sesh live from Hall of Flowers.
From midday, the midday
hot sun. We're looking forward to seeing you at the next one. I'm Sloane Barbour. Talk again soon.
Take care.